You're listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.
With me this week are Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. We're also live every Thursday, so subscribe to us at IEN Magazine on YouTube to get a notification when we go live. Jeff, really excited. Episode 101, only 99 more to the next threshold.
It's a new season.
Yeah, it's a new season. Season 2 of the Today in Manufacturing podcast.
100 episodes is our season?
I guess. I don't know. Do podcasts have seasons?
No.
I mean, maybe if we
They
were
can.
like a serial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, like if we just filmed them all in a bunch and then...
I don't know. There's just like, it's not like we're storytelling here.
Right.
There's no natural conclusion.
Yeah.
Maybe at 200, we'll roll over to season 2.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. Well, before we get started, we have a word from an old friend, Oil Eater.
Oil Eater's household cleaners, industrial cleaners, and industrial equipment are specifically designed to replace dangerous solvents and are used throughout the world. Our safe water-based formula dissolves grease and grime for almost any surface and leaves a fresh, non-chemical scent. Our ultra-concentrated formulas are perfect for light, medium, or heavy cleaning and can be used on shop floors, in parts washers, to clean equipment, and more. VOC compliant, Oil Eater will do an excellent job in a multitude of applications, safely and cost-effectively, while reducing your chemical usage. Safe for the user, safe for the surfaces being cleaned, and safe for the environment. For more information, visit oileater.com or call 800-528-0334.
And we're back. Our first story this week is about Amazon and Salesforce. Amazon and Salesforce cut jobs in latest tech worker purge. Amazon and Salesforce are the latest U.S. tech companies to experience major job cuts. The companies need to trim payroll that expanded quickly during the pandemic. Amazon is cutting 18,000 jobs. It is the largest culling in company history. But remember that the company employs about 1.5 million people around the world. So that's about 1.2% of its workforce. The layoffs will mostly hit Amazon's brick and mortar stores like Amazon Fresh and Amazon Go, as well as the human resources department. You hate to see it. Salesforce is cutting 10% of its workforce, some 8,000 employees. It's the biggest cut in the company's 23-year history. Salesforce has had some unrest at the top. Co-CEO Brett Taylor left, and Slack co-founder Stuart Butterfield left about 2 years after the company's nearly $28 billion acquisition. Salesforce workers will get about 5 months of pay, health insurance, and career resources. Amazon is also offering a, quote, separation payment, transitional health insurance benefits, and job placement support. Jeff, do you think that career resources, job placement support has ever helped anybody?
I don't know. These are not some bad benefits that these folks are getting. I think you're going to get into that in a little bit to when they walk out the door. So not too bad. So can be pretty helpful, I would think, in this case for sure. Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting when you look at these two companies, very entrepreneurial focused, very tech focused. They sort of fit the mold for that prototype, Silicon Valley type of entity that people want to aspire to. Salesforce in particular is interesting. Obviously, we've had some personal dealings with them, personal frustrations, if you will.
Yes.
But that's a company that has grown to a point now where they are in the tens of billions in terms of revenue, but they have really tight margins. We're looking at best probably around 6% operating margin. So in order to make those billions, they've got to invest those billions of dollars. And when you're not producing a product, you're talking about investing in people, salaries, things of that nature. So these cutbacks really are focused on profitability. Because after all of these years of investing and acquisitions and all this other stuff, these people who have put the money into a company like Salesforce, they want to start seeing something back. They want to see the payback a little bit. So, and Salesforce has been very profitable in the last couple of years. So they want to keep that going.
Yeah.
A similar dynamic with, with Amazon. Obviously, they were growing and growing and growing. In 2020 alone, they hired almost 500,000 people.
Yeah.
So obviously, that's slowed down. They have also become accustomed to actually making money. They want to continue doing that.
It took
so
a while,
where's
but
the first place that you look to do that potentially? Again, Amazon doesn't produce any product.
Yeah.
It's in headcount. So it's just interesting to see sort of the transition of these two companies from we got to grow, we got to acquire, we got to keep moving and going to saying, hey, we need to take a step back. We need to maintain all this success that we've had in terms of profitability for our sales force, for our shareholders and everybody else who's counting on that. We have to be a little more responsible. So it's sort of a growing pain, if you will, for both of these companies, and it's hitting at an interesting time. We've seen with other folks as well.
You know, you had mentioned we've worked with Salesforce, and there was a shocking level of dysfunction. Likely due to growing pains, growing too fast, and not properly integrating staff following acquisitions. Anna, it feels like we talk about this problem all the time. There's an acquisition, it doesn't work out, or it's not seamless. There's a lot of growing pains. Why is it that it's always difficult and there hasn't been a process that's really been refined to streamline that sort of thing?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think Amazon in particular has a lot going on here. You know, Andy Jassy blamed in November when these were some layoffs were announced or as being forthcoming, kind of said economic conditions was the reason.
Right.
That's like a big term with a lot of implications. For one, I know that companies like Amazon benefited immensely from the pandemic, that e-commerce boom that we saw. We've seen a few high-profile companies, more than a few, that benefited from the work from home surge, the delivery everything, invest heavily, and then have to walk back some of that in the months and years since that was at its peak. So I think that's some of what we're seeing here. What I found interesting in the case of Amazon specifically is that so many of these 18,000 layoffs are coming from their brick and mortar stores, as you mentioned.
Right.
I think trimming the fat at a corporate level doesn't necessarily provide a broad indication of what a company's strategy is. But in this case, I think it did get my attention a little bit, seeing that so many layoffs were coming from that area. Earlier this year, Amazon announced that it would close all of its brick and mortar bookstores, 4-star shops, pop-ups to focus more on its grocery stores, convenience stores, and Amazon style stores. But according to Retail Info Systems, I don't know if you guys read that. Expansion plans for Amazon Fresh, its grocery store, which first opened in 2020, seem to have stalled. Amazon's pivot from rapid expansion to cost cutting, they said, has left Amazon Fresh stores ready to open but not open across the country. So the company has 44 stores right now in 8 states plus DC, but they haven't opened a new Fresh store since September.
Okay.
And that's despite what appears to be 7 locations that are fully built out and just not open yet.
Why is that? Is it an inventory issue? Because, I mean, in terms of staffing them, these are like cashierless stores, right?
Right. So exactly right. So that's one of the problems from reports. It's kind of suggesting that the technology behind that walking out function where they just charge your account, they can't get the components to build that out in all these stores. So it's a supply chain issue for sure. I think that's reflective of some of those challenges and maybe causing some of that pullback from Amazon is that, that physical storefront thing that they had planned to ramp up quickly, they just can't.
Right.
So, I don't know. I think that, we hear them say something like economic conditions. I think this is a supply chain issue as well. Mm-hmm. Of course, there's a lot of other burdens that are facing these companies, as Jeff alluded to. So it's kind of a mixed bag for Amazon, I think.
So it sounds like for Amazon that maybe this is more of a temporary problem until the supply chain problems are remedied. I mean, if they have, would you say like how many stores ready to go? They're just kind of waiting on technology, or
7,
are they just going to divest of all that?
I don't know. To me, it indicates maybe a pause, right? I doubt that they are going to flee this vertical, this plan that they've put a lot of money and time into. But But yeah, you wonder if like how big of a pause if they're going to lay off all these people. I don't know, like what that's going to take. But
see, I think I could go the other way. You look at Amazon employing 1.5 million people. If they are implementing a lot of these technologies, it's going to streamline their operations in the warehouse, at the retail level, and every place else. This might be just the start.
Yeah.
I mean, there's such a paradigm shift, I think, for these companies. And I think it sets a really positive example for a lot of other tech companies to be aware of the fact that, hey, at some point, you're going to be held accountable. And all those people have invested in your company. They're going to want to see something back.
Yeah.
So you do have to be a little bit more financially responsible, I guess.
Yeah. So it sets a good precedent for cutting jobs is what you're saying, is what I think you said.
Man, you're both you're both anti-job.
Anti-jobs.
No, I would like to, it's 2023. If anyone else would like to wear the crown of being anti-jobs on this podcast, it should be Jeff.
You're handing it over to Jeff. That's so nice.
I'm going to put the caveat, anti-tech jobs.
Oh, okay.
We'll do that.
Okay. Well, it looks like Amazon's not going to run out of people after all, at least in the interim, which was a legitimate concern by the company a year or two ago.
That's true. That's true. They were very concerned about hiring at that time.
Yeah. So I didn't hear about the supply chain issues. That is a shock to me. I thought that maybe the cashierless stores or stores with no checkouts maybe was a miss, but apparently they're just kind of in a holding pattern. So,
well, it could be a miss. We don't really know. I mean, if they can't sub out any of these components, maybe this is very finicky and difficult technology. I don't know.
Salesforce founder and now sole CEO Mark Benioff was quoted saying, "As our revenue accelerated through the pandemic, we hired too many people leading into this economic downturn we're now facing, and I take responsibility for that." I just wanted to note that finally a CEO came out and just flat out said, "We hired too many people. That's my fault. I mismanaged, and it's on me." Whereas normally it's the economic landscape and the conditions, and they're just talking around the whole, it's anybody's fault except mine.
Are there any repercussions for him?
Well, yeah, a lot of people are angry. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's lost a little luster off of his star, I guess you could say.
Awkwardness at those meetings.
Possibly.
Yeah.
It did seem like when he lost, what was the co-CEO, Brett Taylor, like that was a heavy loss for the company. Mm-hmm. But some of those, like when they talk about losing the Slack co-founder, that's the type of thing where after an acquisition, like buying Slack,
right,
you normally have a typical off-road or off-ramp. All right. Well, our next most popular story, John Deere finally grants farmers the right to repair. For some time now, many farmers and John Deere customers have complained about the company's repair policies. These policies require John Deere equipment to be repaired in John Deere facilities using John Deere parts. But now it appears Deere is willing to buck the system. But it didn't come easy. The American Farm Bureau Federation has reached an agreement with John Deere that gives farmers and ranchers the right to repair their own equipment. Part of the reason we saw some of this movement is that farmers are having trouble, quote, accessing tools and resources. John Deere has had other external forces, including, quote, the right to repair bill that was introduced in the Senate in 2022. Some skeptics remain and say that the deal still lacks teeth and could be difficult to enforce while staving off legislation. Anna, is this John Deere just getting... just steering clear of this right to repair bill, or is there actually some goodwill here?
As an outsider to this long-standing fight, I will not take a position, but I will lay out what others are saying about this.
Okay.
To me, the most interesting part about this was actually how the advocates in this field were just kind of flat out not buying this, being genuine. So NPR covered this before we did. They quoted Walter Schweitzer, who's president of the Montana Farmers Union, and he expressed concern about enforcement and also pointed to a provision that allows the company to pull out of the Memorandum of Understanding, which is what this is.
Right.
If any right to repair legislation is enacted, any right to repair legislation. Wow. So his question then was, if John Deere really wants this, then why is it afraid of right to repair legislation? Because the argument, I think, is that the timing of this is designed to actually slow the momentum of that right to repair legislation effort that's been gaining steam both at the federal level and kind of this patchwork of state proposals of how to manage this issue. So that's one thing. Under the agreement, John Deere can also protect its trade secrets and bar users from overriding safety features in its equipment, which might actually be, in my opinion, at the heart of these complaints, because to me, it sounds like this language provides some cover for John Deere to then say, sorry, this scenario requires a technician because of safety or trade secrets. I mean, that's a pretty big umbrella that you could probably hide behind fairly easily. Perhaps that's why the industry is a bit skeptical about whether or not this is going to work, or if this is still going to provide like a significant number of barriers for them to achieve what they're trying to do in terms of fixing this equipment. Because to Schweitzer's point about enforcement, legislation would offer that. A memorandum of understanding, which is seemingly very open to interpretation, still leaves a ton of control in the hands of John Deere, I think, in this case. And so you can see how some of the industry is a little bit nervous about how this is actually going to play out, whether it's going to be truly beneficial to them, or if they're just sort of an observer in this chess game that John Deere is playing with the government, which it kind of looks like it could be. But Jeff, how do you know anyone's intentions?
True, I suppose. By nature, Jeff, is a memorandum of understanding essentially PR?
Well, David, depends on, are you the glass half full or half empty type of guy?
It all depends on the day.
Yeah. It really does. Yeah, at the minute.
There's interesting here, and there's some parallels. Anna and I were just actually talking about this. We both covered the automotive aftermarket a while ago, and early 2000s, the automotive aftermarket, the service end of it was really, they have the same thing. They were looking for the Right to Repair Act to be passed. They had everything drafted. They had advocates for it in Congress, and at that time, right when it was really gaining steam, they came out with the National Automotive Service Task Force, which was basically a go-between between all of the aftermarket folks, basically the people who repair vehicles who are not aligned with a dealership or an OEM, and all the OEs. So Toyota, General Motors, Ford, all that. And basically NHTSF was going to work, and NASTF was going to be the go-between, getting that information, providing it on their website so that the aftermarket would know where to get all the tools, equipment, whatever they needed, all the parts to do the same work that the dealerships could do. So it was a level playing field.
Right.
Well, David, it's 20 years later. They're still trying to pass this Right to Repair Act because there's still gaps in that information that's coming across. Okay, it's still not a level playing field in terms of repairing vehicles and getting all that necessary information. Similar situation here. Is John Deere trying to play nice? Yes, but they're also trying to control the situation. There's absolutely no doubt. And on one hand, you can appreciate where they're coming from, kind of playing both sides here, but John Deere has invested so much time and energy into the technologies that have become their products. You can appreciate why they also want to have some of those service dollars that are coming in to help them continue to reinvest in taking care of those products and technologies that they have created. You can appreciate that. And as these vehicles are made better, they're lasting longer, you're not going to sell as many because you're going to have them repairable. Okay, that's part of the deal here too. So you can appreciate why, whether it's Ford or John Deere, why they want to hold on to those service and repair dollars and activities. You can appreciate that. Plus, it's relationship building for future sales down the road. At the same time, they're a victim of their own success because just as vehicles have become, for lack of a better term, a commodity type item, so have tractors in the agricultural sector. So in order to offer the consumer a level playing field, I think they do have to be more open. But the only way we're going to get there is probably through some sort of regulation. And it's not going to happen quickly because these are big companies. If it's not just John Deere. We're going to be talking about CNH in a little bit. There's a number of other big folks out there. Caterpillar is going to be involved in this. They don't want this either because, again, they want to control that information, what's going out there, so that they don't risk putting any of their IP out there at risk. They don't want to become too transparent. And again, they have a right in some respects to preserve those dollars that are coming in for service and repairs. Yeah,
I understand the need to protect your IP, but I think it all boils down to just that, almost like that regular monthly income that comes from an almost subscription type service where they need X amount of dollars budgeted for these repairs in order to make, costs in order to pay for, an acceptable cost as to what the machine they can sell it for. So basically, to break even, they can sell it for less because they know that the steady income is coming in, and they can't lose that.
Potentially. I mean, I get that, but I mean, they're also investing. The margins on a lot of this big equipment is not great either, especially at the point of sale. Whereas for the service, margins are great.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think they need to at least sort of, I don't know, or one of the things that I was thinking in terms of a middle ground is put a time frame on it. And that's one of the things that was discussed in the automotive sector as well. Well, maybe give the OEs the first, whatever it is, 5 years.
5 years, yeah.
Okay, where they can hold on to that model year information before they release it to the general public or the general aftermarket. Potentially something similar here could be a solution. But I think you're going to continue to see these right to repair acts or legislation or needs go beyond just automotive, beyond just OE stuff. I mean, we've seen it already in consumer electronics. It's going into other places as well. It's going to continue to be an issue as consumers want more information, more transparency, because it's so much easier to obtain.
Do you think it's a bigger deal for farmers because margins are so much slimmer for farmers? Whereas I think of automotive, whereas I don't necessarily care about the right to repair because I don't trust myself enough to even open the hood, let alone, so I bring it to the Toyota dealership to have it fixed. Whereas I feel like a farmer has a much more intimate connection with that equipment and might be a little bit more capable of repairing it.
I don't think it's even the farmers wanting to do a lot of it themselves.
Okay.
But also being able to just have choices in terms of where they can take it. If they want, I don't want to go to a John Deere dealership because you know what? That's 40 miles away. This independent guy down the way here, he can help me out if he can get access to the information. He's willing to make the investments in the tools, the software, whatever else. But he can only make that investment if John Deere puts it out there.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and a lot of the farmers had expressed concerns about having to wait for Deere technicians and what that means for their business when you have a $500,000 brick in your field and you can't do anything.
That's the other thing. This equipment is so expensive. It's such a big, in proportion, such a big investment to what their operation is.
So the American Farm Bureau Federation president, Zippy Duvall, said, quote, "A piece of equipment is a major investment. Farmers must have the freedom to choose where equipment is repaired or to repair it themselves to help control costs." Just reiterating what you said before. The Memorandum of Understanding sets parameters and creates a mechanism to address farmers' concerns. I'm just hoping it's more than like a suggestion box. Just like, no. Leave your concerns in this Google Doc that will never be checked.
Well, I know because that bureau is also giving something up as well. They've basically said to their regional groups and stuff, we're going to not push for this legislation anymore.
And it's just so funny because that's the exact thing that was going on with the task force, the automotive task force. It's basically all these folks were saying, and there's even industry groups who are getting on board with it saying, we don't need the legislation. Stop pushing it. Stop dealing with this. We've got this agreement in place. Again, it's 20 years later, and there still isn't enough information out there.
Well, I think we should trust him because John Deere says it's committed to engaging with farmers and dealers to resolve issues when they arise and agrees to meet with the AFBF at least twice per year to evaluate progress. I'm sure they're going to stick to that commitment. Seems likely. All right, our next most popular story this week. 666 workers laid off after construction contract falls apart. Wanzek Construction laid off 666 contract workers who were building a solar-powered rail mill in Pueblo, Colorado. Wanzek was building the mill for mining company Evraz. Wanzek parent company, Mastech Industrial, said the company will close all operations permanently and terminate all employees as of January 3rd. But the project is only 48% done. The project and the company have had some problems. Mastech and Wanzek were recently hit with a $302 million lawsuit that alleges negligence and breaches of contract. For example, Wanzek is accused of not properly staffing the project and not training subcontractors, which contributed to delays and damages worth north of $130 million. Wanzek countersued and denied many of the allegations. However, the company does accept partial blame for staffing issues with project managers. According to the counter lawsuit, the project would now cost more than $600 million and not be completed until early 2024. Evraz is now looking for a new contractor with hopes of keeping the project alive and many of the project's current subcontractors on board. Anna, this entire story and project had so many problems. I was surprised they even made it to 48% done.
I know, it's crazy. And my first thought when I saw this was, well, sometimes this is what you get when you put out an RFP and go with the lowest cost provider. But I don't think that's what happened here.
You just want to sneak that one in.
Because if you look at MasTech, they are a multinational company. They're publicly traded. They do billions of dollars of, business per year on these contracts. They're very active in many business segments, including logistics, alternative energy, stuff that's really making a lot of money right now, infrastructure projects. Mm-hmm. If you look at how this business unit, Wanzek, ran this project, it looks like a clown show. And it's so crazy to think that, it's not like some fly-by-night organization that is behind this.
Mm-hmm. Clown show in that there was an entire car of clowns. Mm-hmm. They all got out, did disparate items or disparate things that they all failed at.
But it was like kind of an empty clown car. There wasn't even that many clowns in it.
Fair.
Because it wasn't staffed correctly.
Allegedly. And I realize that they filed a counterclaim disputing a lot of this, but, why did it happen then that they couldn't complete the project? That's the big question. I think it doesn't exactly scream like we're blameless when they run cut and run on like a massive project like this one. It doesn't make sense. So
yeah,
I think there's some concerns reflected here in what we've seen a lot of businesses experience. In my opinion, you've seen some companies, of course not all, but get dollar signs in their eyes with this glut of demand in areas like construction and bite off more than they can chew. And I know that there are a lot of businesses out there that have had to make some changes to their culture, kind of grew their business with a mantra of say yes and we'll figure it out later.
Right.
And maybe the current business conditions just don't allow for that. We've really never been in a place where workers are just flat out not available. Mm-hmm. I don't, in my lifetime,
True.
I can't, not being able to get contractors just for whatever price you could, at least get somebody, but
workers and the volatility in terms of material costs.
Exactly. And, the lack of people, the lack of training also, I think, could be a result of this company maybe being over ambitious about their ability to overcome these resource issues. That they have maybe done in the past, mm-hmm. Not quite paying enough attention or paying enough respect to that fact that this environment is just certainly unprecedented. To me, it seemed like it was an issue of they just flat out made a mistake. They couldn't do the job with what they had available.
Well, and maybe this is how they've done it 99 times out of every 100 projects and it's worked, you know?
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, this particular area, this particular project, they couldn't staff and it became a big issue for the company.
Well, and you can't blame a company for, it's not in so many business people's DNA to think we would ever have to turn down a contract or turn down money, Mm-hmm. I mean, I know in our business too, it's just like let's see if we can figure out how to make
say
this,
yes, figure it out.
Say yes, figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think that there are certain industries right now and, certain types of business projects where it's just that doesn't work right now.
Jeff, I really feel for the community in particular, which is left in limbo. And while I hope this still comes to fruition, do you think that is Evraz being too optimistic, thinking that they can continue the project, keeping the same subcontractors on board and basically just finding a new contractor?
No, I think it's still a viable project. I think it's interesting. Did you read the lawsuits? Reading the verbiage within this, it just seems so cut and dry.
Yeah.
It's so obvious when the plaintiff brings this argument against it, how just nefarious the other
defendant,
party was and how they can't even believe how they could just not communicate. It was so simple, so straightforward. So taking that, with a grain of salt, it does look like there was just a lot of communication issues more than just resource issues. Obviously, that was a concern, managing the number of different subcontractors and all of that. But again, it really felt like Evraz really just, they weren't getting the data they needed from the contractor as far as how things were progressing, who was doing what in a more organized fashion. Maybe that is something that, what's the name of it?
Wanzek.
Wanzek just wasn't familiar. Maybe it was that dynamic that was somehow different for him. Mm-hmm. Hard to imagine with the number of other projects they've done. If you look at their website, like Anna was alluding to, they've done a ton of this type of stuff before. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a head scratcher. What's also interesting here, and I think one of the reasons Evraz is definitely going to follow through on this project, is this was a huge investment in this mill within this town of Pueblo. And I mean, they received some pretty significant incentives to go forward with this. They've got a $15 million grant from the city. They've got a 0.5-cent sales tax fund that's there for economic development to help pay for this. And there's a bunch of other incentives that are in place as well, provided Everaz keeps about 1,000 employees on the payroll.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of incentive for Everaz to go forward with this. I think they'll continue to find a new contractor. The way it ended so abruptly, the way Everaz just basically fired them and said, this isn't working, we're suing you for breach of contract. Interesting approach, I guess. I mean, I don't know if there's going to be people lining up to grab on and finish this job.
Yeah.
But it does seem like they've got incentives anyway to follow through and get it done.
Well, and maybe more so than Everaz is the community, because they already have so much invested.
Yeah.
I will say on the safety side, though, there are some weird things that happened throughout the course of this project. When Wanzek didn't comply with the contract's programs and protocols, like one particular instance where crews uncovered an active water line that shut down the project for a week. In another safety violation, a hydraulic crane barely missed a live 6,700 volt power line.
Damn.
And the strike of that water cooling line resulted in the immediate shutdown of both the coil and steel mills, which led to a 24-hour loss of production in both mills. And now Palmer NA, which is the parent company or part of Everaz, I think it's all Everaz Palmer, argues that this negligence led to an unacceptable risk for furnace operators at the mill, endangering workers' lives. And there were so many more examples of these safety problems that maybe, you know, at some point, more than the communication, they were just like, hey, it's just not safe to have them in charge anymore.
Mm-hmm. True.
Because it seemed like there were other businesses operating at this site. And I mean, when you're talking about a 24-hour loss of production at 2 mills, that could be devastating.
No.
All right. Our next most popular story this week, CNH workers reject, quote, last, best, and final offer. Last Saturday, more than 1,000 CNH industrial workers on strike in Iowa and Wisconsin rejected the company's last, best, and final offer. Workers will continue the no more than 8-month work stoppage at the construction and agricultural equipment maker. They're continuing the now more than 8-month work stoppage at the construction, agricultural, and equipment maker. There it is. The United Auto Workers Union will meet to discuss next steps to take with the company. This is the first vote on an offer since the workers walked off the job. Workers at plants in Burlington, Iowa, and Racine, Wisconsin, previously rejected at the start of the strike a 3-year deal that included 18.5% raises because of concerns that the proposed raises wouldn't cover soaring inflation and health insurance costs. The UAW has not discussed what CNH has offered since the strike began in May. Anna, I have to feel like if they were not happy 8 months ago that the deal was not going to cover soaring inflation and health insurance costs, that's changed quite a bit in the last 8 months. And so I wonder if they're anywhere near the two sides were anywhere close to each other.
Yeah, we do know a little bit about that based on some of the follow-up coverage that I've seen. I think we know exactly why this was a popular story. I think that 18.5% number was probably really got some people's attention when you see that they were offered that as a raise in the initial round of discussions, and this was at the beginning of this 8 months. I think people seeing that maybe had some questions about what's going on here. I know I did.
Mm-hmm.
To add more context, CNH had said that the most recent rejected contract offer contained a 4-year deal with wage increases of now 25 to 38%.
My goodness.
And while I usually take the side of workers and would encourage them to hustle in whatever way they can to get the best deal possible that they can, I think this is hard for observers to understand. A bit of that I blame on the UAW. The UAW says that the increase isn't enough to cover inflation. They've been talking about this inflation thing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They say it doesn't include enough vacation days and it doesn't offer better healthcare coverage. It sounds like this healthcare issue, which is not, I think, being widely reported, is being a huge part of this as a sticking point.
Mm-hmm.
The workers say that their premiums are getting so high that alone would eat up so much of this pay increase that they would be slated to receive. I I blame the UW a bit for not making that more clear in the reports, because you're just really not seeing that part of it. You're just seeing these numbers, right? These wage increases.
Incredibly high.
And they're incredibly high, right?
Yeah.
18.5%, I think, to anyone who's looking at that in a vacuum, like that seems like a very generous increase.
Yeah.
I think the union and the workers are also pointing to CNH's 20% increase in profit last year. I do think, though, that there is a point where you have to consider that not every year allows for that.
Mm-hmm.
I know that companies are looking at maybe going into a potential downturn with a potential recession on the way. That does not absolve them from any responsibility to their employees. However, these pay raises are, I think, ideally permanent. So you just have to keep in mind that maybe not every year is going to be as profitable as this year was.
Mm-hmm. It is kind of interesting that the company who is seeing record profits as a result of inflation that people are paying on their products is not willing to pay the same inflation for wages for their workers.
But 38% doesn't cover that, you don't think?
No. Theirs were only marked up 22% or something like that on their. But yeah, no, I think 38% will cover it.
So secondly, I have concerns that these workers are taking this to the point of no return.
Mm-hmm.
This strike has gone on much, much longer than the average worker strike, which is 2 months, by the way. For context, Deere's worker strike, they're in the same industry, was 5 weeks. CNH has already put temporary workers in place to keep factories running. The longer they stay, the more valuable those workers become.
Oh, yeah.
And now CNH has given the workers, the striking workers, I should say, a little bit of an out. They say that while this is their last offer, that they're encouraging the union and the workers to reconsider and to put it to another vote. And there is some pressure building. The latest vote was quite close. To answer your question, it was 45% for and 55% against. So it's getting there. Which means hundreds of workers want this to be over, I think. Yeah. 2, the longer this strike lasts, the more workers are going to feel that strain of $400 a week strike pay, which for 8 months is a very, very long time. That's meant to be a Band-Aid. Mm-hmm. They should not be living their lives for 8 months on that amount of money. That's not working for a lot of people, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. And then number 3, spring is ag equipment season. So right now, the busiest time for CNH is now and right around the corner. So I just don't see this lasting much longer. I think between the two sides, they have to either, if this is the last offer, then they need to revote and pass it. Otherwise, I'm worried that their jobs are gone. I think that we're to the point where we're maybe pushing too far on this.
No, I agree. Something has got to give. Jeff, do you think it might be that some workers, if we're talking about a 45 to 55% split, maybe that 45%, leaves the union and just goes to work for CNH on their own?
What's even more awkward than that is the fact that this actually passed at the Iowa location.
Okay.
It passed at so I think I think the split is like 400 in Iowa, 700 in Burlington, or is it Milwaukee?
Racine.
So yeah, if it would have just been Iowa, it would have gone through. There's so many factors here working against these workers. First of all, you just saw a company have a quarterly improvement in their profits by 22% using replacement workers. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That does not help your cause. Neither does the fact that they came forward with, at a minimum, 18.5%, and you said no thanks. Mm-hmm. The other thing from my public perception as well is you're seeing consumer priced goods stabilize. I'm not going to say it's great, but when you're looking at the things you buy every day, the prices, whatever they've come up to, they're staying there. Gas prices are down a little bit. So a lot of these factors related to inflation and cost of living, that argument isn't going to hold as much water as it would have 8 months ago. Mm. Same thing when you look at healthcare costs. Yes, they're ridiculous. They're expensive. That's a lot, but that's always going to be a sticking point whenever you get into these types of negotiations. And again, 20%, it seems like there is some concessions there. So when you put all these factors together, I just think these striking workers are in a really tough spot. And to Anna's point, coming up on your busy season, if they get through the spring without this strike being settled, mm-hmm. these jobs are not going to be there.
Yeah. No, that's a scary proposition for a lot of people in the Midwest. You had mentioned the most recent earnings reports. That's where I got that 22%. I was wrong. I don't know what the markup's been on their equipment. I grabbed the wrong stat. But do you think, could they split that at all, where Iowa holds their own vote and Wisconsin holds their own vote? Is that doable?
I don't think so. If they're in the same branch or the same union and that's who's negotiating everything, no, I think they're all together. I mean, that's the solidarity of the union. What was also kind of interesting. Did you read some of the quotes from the union leader who basically, when he rolled everything out, he said he was really surprised that there wasn't more of a reaction.
Yeah.
People were just like, no, they're not going to do this. There wasn't a lot of questions. There wasn't a lot of dialogue back and forth.
Just a straight no.
Somebody is in these workers' ears in Racine.
Yeah.
Like somebody is telling them something that has really got them holding on to this, whether it is the healthcare situation, maybe it is a little bit older workforce at that facility or something else. But there is something that they're just really holding on to.
Well, it's an entirely separate podcast, but healthcare costs have just become obnoxious for everybody. And I understand if that is a sticking point. And I do think that maybe more so than inflation could be a stronger issue for them to argue.
I did read something in there like a $6,400 deductible or something like $6,400 deductible. That is incredibly high.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you can understand the frustration there. But again, when you look at John Deere workers coming back for a 10% increase, and this is almost double.
Well,
I don't know.
Almost double. I mean, almost
at the outset.
Yeah,
well,
like
at the minimum. I'm saying there are these. I think these are probably more managerial spots that they're talking about these larger increases. I'm going to guess. I don't think these are stuff on the plant floor, but I don't know.
Oh my goodness, 38%. All right. Our most popular story this week is a feel-good story. For now. 86-year-old man nearly done building 400-mile-per-hour car. Jim Byerly is an 86-year-old Michigan man who has been working on a 27-foot-long, 4,000-pound streamlined car since 1996. Byerly believes his car will be ready by August to top 400 miles per hour on the Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah. The octogenarian has spent $250,000 of his own money on building his streamliner, and he won't even be the one to drive it. Byerly's neighbor, Eric Baer, a fellow automotive enthusiast, is going to be the man behind the wheel. If the streamliner tops 400 miles per hour, it will beat the current record of 348 miles per hour set in 2010. Anna, your thoughts on this man's 30-plus year effort to set a land speed record?
It's a fun story. Jeff and I were talking before the podcast about how there's not really a great counterpoint to this. Like, what do we? I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes you just shouldn't have a dream.
I hope he fails. He started this in 1996, making him 59 years old at the time. And, they say that retirement isn't for everyone and that some people don't take to it well. But I guess, all you need is $250,000, tinkering skills, because he's been working on the car since he was a teenager, right?
Patience.
Yeah. You got plenty of ways to occupy your time here. So anyway, I don't know. If he can top that record, I would be all for it. I think it's awesome. That's incredible that he's doing this. I thought it might be fun to pull out some world records that were established by elderly people, because the story is a great reminder that we can and should continue to pursue our passions. So when those retirement years are upon us, we can approach them with vigor and maybe even achieve a few lofty goals. So now, granted, many of these are records purely for being the oldest person to do something, but this first one is not. Okay, in 2020, 68-year-old George Hood broke the record for the longest plank at 8 hours.
Oh my God!
Doesn't that make you want to die? My collarbone is breaks just thinking about it.
I was just complaining about playing basketball for an hour and a half.
Yeah. 8-hour plank.
8 minutes might be a struggle.
68 years old.
Yeah.
All right. So this is another good one. Irene O'Shea became the world's oldest skydiver at 102 years of age.
Get after it.
Irene. Okay. And then Jack Reynolds at age 107 was the oldest person to appear on a soap opera.
What?
I know. I don't know. I love this stuff. Keep at it, Jim. You're an inspiration to all of us. I hope that you have the ability to achieve this dream, and I hope that someday I have even a smidgen of the initiative that you have in your 80s. So that's awesome.
I guess the only counterpoint would be the safety issue. Is just make sure you're safe, because it makes me think of, I think his name was Mad Mike. Who made his own rocket?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's not going to drive it, right?
That was the other point is, so because he's not going to drive it, is he even going to set the record, or will the record actually go to Eric Baer?
Oh, good question. I don't know.
So
oldest person to design a very fast car driven by someone else could be a record. Right?
it could be. Jeff, one thing I liked about Jim is that he said he only has one item on his bucket list, and this is it.
No, that's awesome. I mean, to Anna's point, I was going to talk about that too. Some folks retire and they just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. And if you see the guy in the report, like, he's looking good for 86.
Oh,
man.
yeah.
He's looking spry and ready to roll. Got some of that old man strength going on. He'd be the guy in the bar you think you're getting away with something.
Oh, yeah.
And he puts you in your place.
That you'd arm wrestle at like midnight, and you're just like, yeah, he knocked me off my stool.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Yeah. No, it's cool. I think the other thing that was interesting here is just the Bonneville Salt Flats out in Utah. I mean, there's been such a connection to that location with just engineering. I mean, obviously primarily automotive, but it's been cool some of the things that have been going on there. There's all sorts of different records for going out there and setting speeds. And we didn't get enough technical details on the vehicle to see which one this fits in.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know there's going to be some people saying that doesn't sound like a land speed record. Well, there's lots of different classifications.
Yeah.
But it is kind of cool when you look back at the history of everything that's been going on there. There's been 4 different people that have gone over 600 miles per hour out there. One guy has gone over 700 miles per hour. And he's done it twice.
My goodness.
Been some other kind of cool things from an engineering perspective. In 1963, Dick Beath set a record. He went 130 miles an hour using a vehicle. Dick Beath.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
You know?
No. It sounded familiar. Yeah. Oh, Richard Beath.
Yes.
No.
Anyway, he set a record with a vehicle that was fashioned from a World War II aircraft belly tank. So
interesting.
Good for him. Been some other cool stuff that's going on. The world's fastest diesel in 2006 went 350 miles an hour. More recently, we've seen the fastest electric vehicle. The Venturi Buckeye Bullet 3, it was a bunch of college kids from Ohio State, went over 340 miles per hour.
Man.
And actually, as recently as 2018, we saw the Kawasaki Ninja set a record for the fastest street legal production motorcycle at just under 210 miles per hour.
Jeez.
On a crotch rocket.
So on a crotch rocket across basically concrete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what that would be incredible.
Well, what's interesting too is the salt flats are just like an amazing geographical feature to see. People go out there just to take it in. And one of the things I was reading up on is that they're very conscious of don't leave anything behind.
Oh,
preserve the environment.
Yeah.
And then twice a year, you've got these speed weeks out there where they're doing all this crazy automotive testing and engineering. And apparently they're doing a pretty good job of preserving the environment because everything's still where it's supposed to be.
What I liked is that he initially grew his passion for cars reading Hot Rod magazine.
Yeah.
And it blew his mind when he finally, with this project, was featured in Hot Rod magazine.
Oh, that's awesome.
That was a really cool part. The neighbor I found interesting. He's quite a race car driver. He's been in several drag races, and he's been doing it since the 90s. Another kind of sweet part of this is that he gained a little extra motivation in 2020 when Byerly's wife of 63 years died. And he said the only thing that drives him every day is that she would always tell him, I just want this to do what you want it to do. And that's what drives him every day. I think that's really cool. Yeah. All right. Well, before we move on to In Case You Missed It, the stories that maybe weren't as popular on the websites, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward, we have another word from our longtime sponsor, Oil Eater.
Oil Eater's household cleaners, industrial cleaners, and industrial equipment are specifically designed to replace dangerous solvents and are used throughout the world. Our safe water-based formula dissolves grease and grime for almost any surface and leaves a fresh, non-chemical scent. Our ultra-concentrated formulas are perfect for light, medium, or heavy cleaning and can be used on shop floors, in parts washers, to clean equipment, and more. VOC compliant, Oil Eater will do an excellent job in a multitude of applications, safely and cost-effectively, while reducing your chemical usage. Safe for the user, safe for the surfaces being cleaned, and safe for the environment. For more information, visit oileater.com or call 800-528-0334.
And we're back with In Case You Missed It. The stories, not so popular, but still pretty important. Anna, what is your In Case You Missed It this week?
Sure. So I selected a story titled "More Than 60% of Manufacturing Leaders Think a Recession Will Happen This Year." And I know this sounds like a real downer, but I don't know if it is as bad as it
There
sounds.
were some positive points to this downer.
There were many positive points, actually. NAM, which is the National Association of Manufacturers, something like that, released its latest survey results on its Q4 outlook and revealed that 62.4% of manufacturing leaders believe the U.S. economy will slide into a recession this year if we haven't already. Staffing remains a primary concern. 75%-ish of leaders found that keeping quality employees and finding them will be a top problem in 2023, with 65% also noting supply chain challenges and 60% increased material costs. So despite these worries, NAM says that more than 65% of manufacturing leaders plan to spend capital on new equipment and technology, 64% on upskilling and training, 55% on hiring, and 52% on R&D. Nearly 69% of manufacturing leaders have a positive outlook for their company. The historical average is 75%. But I think the aforementioned points suggest that any type of recession we might encounter could be vastly different from what we've seen before. And I know people are kind of saying that a lot. I find it interesting when businesses talk about the potential for a recession if it's not already here. Because if it's already here and we don't know about it, then what kind of recession is it? Like we should know, right?
Yeah.
And I get the feeling from this data that manufacturers are hearing the warning signs just like everyone else. They're seeing the aggressiveness from the Fed, the lumpiness of the stock market. They're seeing the news reports, and they almost feel like it's inevitable. And yet when they look at their own businesses, they don't see a scenario that's actually mandating that they slow or stop investing in equipment, people, R&D, and the like. So my opinion on this data is that it's a bit nuanced, and that if we can get through this year without talking ourselves into a recession collectively, then, that's going to be a big win. But if we don't, I think many individual businesses are showing us from their answers here that they're in a position of relative strength, honestly.
Right.
And maybe that's come from some of the right sizing and other related lessons of the pandemic. But I would say that despite this dramatic headline, I don't feel like we need to be losing sleep over the health of the manufacturing sector just yet, because it feels like there's still a lot of positivity there. I know that, we all worked in this industry during the Great Recession. And when that was going on, people were really, really tightening up. They were really scaling back. There was a lot of layoffs. There was a lot of crazy stuff happening. And I don't think manufacturers are really they don't seem nervous really about this. I think people are going into it thinking like, we're going to continue with the status quo because we can right now.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's so worrying to me. I don't know if you guys agree.
Well, do you think part of it is that because after going through 2008, after going through the pandemic, that, as you said, all this right sizing, they're just in a better position to sort of survive? I mean, if we're in a recession, I don't know, maybe if in 5 years we look back and we're like, wow, we're doing like so good now. That was definitely a recession.
Nobody knew.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. I do think that, that there's been some right sizing. I think there's still been some lingering impacts of the Great Recession on how businesses operate. I think people learned a lot during that because it was so disruptive. And then, like you said, the pandemic sort of, reminded us of what we needed to do to kind of scale back and make our businesses a little bit more fit, a little bit more healthy, and make the right choices. And so, I don't know.
Well, and that was another thing that drew me to this story was that the majority of businesses thought that a recession was coming, but all the decisions that they were still making definitely made you think twice about like, okay, it's not going to be that bad. And I was actually interested on the cross section of people that they talked to. It was kind of an even split. Mostly medium-sized manufacturers, about 44%, then large manufacturers, about 35%, and then small manufacturers were the rest of that. So it was a good cross section of the industry, and they were showing, it seemed to me, Jeff, that most of this came down to raw material prices and the instability around there as to whether or not it might be a recession.
That's every year, though.
Yeah,
that's just an ongoing concern. That it's amplified because of the supply chain concerns. It's amplified because of the logistics problems that we've run into. But again, I would go back. I would agree 100% with what you guys were saying about people learning so much from the recession in 2008, 2009. Now, part of that was too, I have never seen a collective group, industry, whatever you want to say, more petrified of one individual.
Yeah.
Manufacturers were terrified of Barack Obama. When he was elected, there was just so many concerns about what was going to happen with healthcare costs, what was going to happen with any taxes, all of that kind of stuff. And they stopped spending. They stopped. They cut back, like Anna alluded to, and they realized they lost pace. 2010, 11, 12, once they realized, what are we doing here? We got to spend money and catch up. They did it. They caught up. Same thing happened during the COVID lockdown. People still continued to invest, maybe out of necessity a little bit more than anything else, but in automation and other technologies. They knew they had to stay competitive. Same dynamic here. All of these cost pressures are always going to be there. I think manufacturers, regardless of size, have become more astute in understanding how to navigate these types of situations. They're planning out further, whether it's shifting from a just-in-time manufacturing model to a little bit more longer term, understanding, hey, I do need to keep a little bit more inventory on the shelves. And just understanding too, with it being a global economy and so many different factors coming into play, you just have to be ready for almost anything. So I think once you've gone through the stuff we've gone through with 2020 and 2021, a lot of these things have to be looked at as this is just the cost of doing business. This is the world we live in. Manufacturing's always been resilient just by nature as well. So I think some of the positive elements that come out of this, I wish we could translate this to more of the consumer economy as well, and helping them to understand you don't need to panic. We've been here before. This stuff has always been there. There's spikes, there's ebbs and flows to it. But one of the benefits of being in a capitalist economy is you've got 100 million consumers out there that are going to help dictate how quickly this can be corrected and how it's going to be impacted.
Right.
The other thing, if you guys can please help me, why is it so important to put a label on stuff? Why does it need to be called a recession? Why does it have to be called that? Why can't we just say, you know what, it was down, now it's up, now it's getting better? No, technically this is a recession. No, technically we're up by 1/10 of a point, so it's not a recession.
Yeah, like you have
Who
to
cares?
be be told that it is a recession in order for it to be impactful to you. That's what I don't get. Like, so it may already be here.
No, isn't that part of the deal though, that the Fed has kind of changed the goalposts in terms of what a recession is? Because we were technically kind of in a recession, and then they kind of moved it, so we weren't in a recession.
That's okay.
No, I mean, I get it. It's completely arbitrary. But I mean, maybe it's after we reach a certain economic threshold. I don't know.
I don't want to be super technical here, but I think it's kind of dumb.
Okay. All right.
D word.
He's anti-jobs and anti-recession. I don't think you're going to get many people upset over being like
anti-recession.
Tech jobs.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point, I mean, if it's a recession but no one treats it that way, then what is it? It's like the tree in the forest.
It's a downturn.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know?
One other thing that I found interesting, well, actually there are a couple of other things. One was that manufacturers definitely are expecting rising health insurance costs to continue, but that was slightly down in September. 7.7% thought that they were going to increase. That's down to, they thought they were going to go up 7.7%, and that's down to 7.3%. So some positivity there. The other was that more manufacturing leaders, a majority, only 53%, said that they've considered using high-skilled immigrants to fill or to help with the ongoing labor crisis. And there was an interesting breakdown in terms of people being interested in H-1B visas, people saying that they would even be interested in lesser skilled immigrant visas like non-agricultural H-2Bs, and 30% of people said that they would consider refugees and other special immigrant visa holders just as a result of this ongoing labor crisis and how they're going to try and fix it. So I thought that was something that maybe manufacturers were looking to non-traditional places.
Definitely.
All right. Who's got the next in case you missed it? Jeff, what do you got this week?
Special thanks to Ben Munson for this story.
Yeah.
A tractor prototype that runs on cow manure.
Yes, perfect.
The types of stories that I love, as you guys know by now, is anything dealing with sort of new weaponry for the military and anything that is agricultural technology. I love these stories, and this one makes a ton of sense. And there's more technical details within the article. I'll leave you to that. But basically, the thought here is runs on poop. You know, animals poop on the farm. You collect it, You put it into a tank or some sort of slurry pond. From there, you have other processing equipment on the farm that you feed this stuff into. There's special applications, special add-ons basically for the tractor so that it can run on this. It's basically biomethane. And what I love about this, number one, is you're making use, there's no, pardon the pun, there's no waste involved.
Yeah.
It's incredibly clean in terms from emissions perspective. It's really, once you can get the actual processing equipment in place, and we've seen other places do this. There's a number of other farms that do this. They usually use it for some other process like making cheese, making other dairy products, things like that, bread, bakery, whatever the case is. But to be able to turn it around and use it on something as vital as a tractor to your farming operation is incredible.
Yeah.
The other thing I like about this too is not only does it bring new technology to agriculture, which desperately needs it, deserves it, we all want it to happen, is it can transition the farm, which is a manufacturing facility. It always has been. It's a production plant. And this type of equipment and this type of technology and this type of mindset helps push that forward as well. Now, this is still very expensive processing equipment, and there's still a lot of technology that needs to be worked out in terms of making the different temperature controls, the different components that are needed in retrofitting a tractor to be able to use this fuel. And they it's putting on about 270 horsepower, so it's not a huge tractor, but it's a solid field tractor that you can use to work in the fields with. So, all the stuff that's involved with basically methane power and liquefied natural gas, which is what we're talking about here, it's involved. But again, it's sort of pushing agricultural production into an area that we need it to go to, and that we should really champion, I think.
I think it's interesting because beyond the tractor, this could be anything that runs on the farm. You could transition eventually. You could transition
as long as it can retrofit that motor.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of pizzerias that change their fleet to run on oil because they have crazy amounts of fryer oil, and so they run their fleet on that. I was really inspired by this story. I was also inspired by the sheer amount of puns that Munson could fit into it.
He's good at that.
He's very good at that. Anna, what were your thoughts on this feel-good agricultural dung story?
I thought it was awesome. Yeah, like my favorite line of this story was when Ben talks about their estimate that when the prototype tractor is integrated within the on-farm liquid fugitive biomethane production process, don't know what that is, it's possible for an operation's overall carbon footprint to be better than zero, he said.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, if you can get even close to that, sign me up. I'm ready to start shoveling. Oh, I got beat.
Oh, man. Tally on the board.
I got beat.
A
lot of drop jaws.
Rick just gave you the sternest look ever.
We just upped it to PG-13, and we're sorry for all the families out there.
Real potty mouth over there.
I'm gonna get a check mark for that.
Well, while Anna's out shoveling feces, no, it's I can't even remember where I was going to go with that as a result of the sheer shock. So I'll just move on. In case you missed it this week, was about Tesla. And Tesla's eyeing a huge Texas expansion. 2023 has been rather brutal for Tesla. Despite selling a record 1.3 million vehicles last year, the company missed projections. As a result, Tesla stock has plummeted, down nearly 70% since the beginning of last year. Musk even set a Guinness World Record for largest loss of a personal fortune in history, losing between $182 billion and $200 billion since November 2021. But that hasn't stopped Tesla from moving forward. According to a Reuters article, the company plans to expand its Gigafactory into Austin, Texas, to the tune of some $775.7 million. The company wants to build 5 new facilities in Texas, including a test lab for cells and a cathode unit. Tesla still operates a production facility in Fremont, California, as well as a gigafactory in Nevada, and it's rumored that the car maker will announce another potentially $1 billion gigafactory in northern Mexico. Now, before I get into the details of this story, I remember what my original point was, and it was just that finally we can turn the tables on cow waste being demonized for climate change, and it can really be a mechanism for change.
Yeah, I mean, if this thing it's a prototype, so I don't know if we've turned the table.
I mean, no, we can. We
can.
haven't.
It's the thing that leads to the thing.
It's the thing that can turn the table.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, it's about time because those cows have just been beaten up for years.
They have
so let me just
very low self-esteem.
You're doing an article on Tesla and Elon Musk, and there was an immediate correlation to cow manure.
Actually, yeah, that's you could tell.
I won't connect the dots.
No, if you go back and listen, when I said lost instead of loss, that was when it came back to me, because it was just like the largest. Oh, lost. Ah! No, but yes, so no correlation at all.
At all. None. Okay.
Anyway, I thought this was interesting because Tesla has been a favorite and Elon Musk in particular has been just a really popular punching bag. I mean, earned.
Yeah.
Earned. But I thought it was interesting that the company is continuing to invest not just in Texas, but I also found it peculiar that they might have another $1 billion gigafactory in northern Mexico around the Monterrey area. The other part of this story was that, especially, we've talked about it with Tesla and how they run their business, and how that might affect suppliers a little bit as well. Just before Christmas, we ran a story about a Tesla supplier repeatedly ignoring worker concerns, and that leading to a host of safety issues at their plant. So I just want to talk about being aggressive but careful and how these growing pains and demands can impact suppliers. For example, the Simwan, which manufactures doors for vehicles made at Tesla's Texas Gigafactory, it's about 20 miles away. About 2 weeks ago, an OSHA investigation found that Simwan, which is a subsidiary of a South Korean company, Myongshin Industries, ignored repeated concerns raised by workers and willfully exposed them to unsafe machine operations, potential falls, and a lack of PPE. OSHA found several problems at the plant. A big part of the problem was power. Namely, there was a ton of extension cords on the floor everywhere, in every room, which just seems ridiculous beyond comprehension to me. There has to be somebody like an Alex with a bunch of gaff tape that's just ready and willing to tape all those things down.
Just trip hazards everywhere.
Hazards everywhere. As well as lockout, tagout problems, the PPE problems we mentioned before in terms of like crazy hot parts coming off of a conveyor, and then staff working near exposed live electrical parts. So, while this is seemingly great developments for Tesla in Texas as well as the workforce in Texas, let's just make sure that everything is, and it's a company that is known for pushing a brutal pace. Mm-hmm. Let's just try and do it a little bit safer and make sure that it's a little bit safer throughout the supply chain. I don't know if you guys had a chance to check out either of these stories and your thoughts on what's happening with Tesla. Jeff, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, always interesting. As far as expanding the Texas facility and the possible talk in Mexico, not a surprise. Mm-hmm. I think you're going to see Tesla potentially not just powering their own vehicles, but offering this technologies to other OEs in the automotive sector. Mm-hmm. They've got some pretty stiff competition. We got Panasonic right in their same neighborhood. A bunch of other folks coming online as well. So that part of it wasn't surprising, makes a lot of sense. But like you say, you hope we can go at the right pace. We're talking about a company who refuses to adjust their autopilot platform software, regardless of all of the safety issues that have been raised, the NTSB investigation that continues to be ongoing. So I would agree, slow her down a little bit. And also, Tesla's going to be in a situation with the cachet that company has. It doesn't matter how loosely connected or how directly connected you are to any supplier. Now, to here, it's a very direct connection in a number of ways. You're going to be linked to all that. Yeah. So you do have an obligation, for your own company's sake and well-being and prosperity going forward, to be in the loop and be paying attention to these things. We talked about it with the child labor issues with Hyundai. Yeah, I mean, that wasn't their facility; it was a supplier. But guess what? They're connected to it too now. Mm-hmm. So it is definitely something that they need to embrace as they get bigger and more prominent.
Anna, your thoughts on another expansion in Texas for Tesla?
Yeah, I mean, I think you raised an appropriate point around speed. What kind of pressure is Tesla under right now as their stock just plummets in value, and it's lost 70-something% of its value over the last year. And then to have that miss, they really need to get production up and running and be able to hit those targets, especially with all these competitors coming into play right now. Mm-hmm. They're just dealing with so many different pressures, and then on top of it, all the other business pressures that exist for everyone. So you're right in being concerned that Elon Musk and crew hits the gas on this, and then we run into some problems later because they're trying to do too much at once to try to address all these issues that are facing them right now. So hopefully they make some good choices as they're trying to develop here, because you can't force it. You have to do things the right way. Otherwise, it's just going to be worse in the end.
Well, as they have scaled over the years, they've done so, doubling in size. But we've mentioned it before, all relatively small jumps. Now we're starting to get into way bigger jumps, and just logistically, operationally, much more difficult. All right, before we do our final thoughts, we have a comment from Nolan who says, "Don't worry, Anna, the Today in Manufacturing podcast is promptly marked as not for children upon upload to YouTube." That's good to know, Nolan. Let's start dropping F-bombs.
Nolan just learned a new word.
Sorry, everyone. Won't happen again, I don't think. It might, though.
Oh, she's coming out hot. Anna, your final thoughts this week.
Okay, so speaking of things that are for children, my daughter's turning 8 in February, and we just booked her birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I know. So I what have I done? I don't know. But
don't miss those.
Succumb to the mouse.
It's 2 hours. It's going to be an intense 2 hours. But I wanted to put this out to the audience, the listeners, because I know there's some very intelligent brains out there, and maybe I don't know who would know how to answer this question. Maybe I should go to YouTube. But okay, so part of the birthday package is that she gets to spend 30 seconds a minute inside this the ticket blaster room.
Yeah.
And just get as many tickets.
Like a ticket machine.
Yeah. And I feel like I should prepare her with a little bit of strategy for that. Does anyone know what that strategy is? Is there a way to game the ticket booth to get as many tickets as possible? I have no idea. I've never done that before.
No, I have some experience. I was in 8th grade, I was in a money machine. And first of all, it's a real whirlwind when you're in there.
Oh, I'm
it's
sure.
Just sensory overload. There were dollar bills. I'm sure these are tickets. It's gonna be crazy. And $1 was difficult to grab, so I can't even imagine trying to grab these tickets.
Child
these
hands?
tiny little hands.
What's gonna happen? She's just gonna freeze and not.
Yes.
I think you just need to wrap her in duct tape.
And just kind of.
Or maybe static. Really wash her clothes for that day with every pair of gym shorts that you have in the house. Just get that static charge really going.
Again, maybe an engineer could answer the question, or anyone else who's listening that.
No, I will say that people who have tried the T-shirts, that doesn't work because you throw the T-shirt over the vent and it just blasts tickets or dollars up your neck and in your face, rendering you blind. The one thing that worked for me is that there will be pockets where they'll get stuck that the fan just doesn't turn. So look to the corners and snag those tickets.
All right.
And then go from there. But how long is she in the machine?
I don't know.
Oh,
I don't I can't imagine that when she gets in there, she's just going to be ready to go. So I thought maybe I'd give her a few tips and then.
Oh, Mark Waterman says a quart of rubber cement might help. Oh no, I have a jar I bought when Spider Tack came out as banned from the MLB. I bought it because I had to know. And I thought it might help with dodgeball. We can cover her in Spider Tack, or maybe just her clothes, because it says don't let it touch your skin.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons.
This is my child, though.
Yeah,
so I probably won't do that.
We'll just have a disposable shirt. We'll have strict instructions. Don't touch anything. Just let the tickets come to you. No, I feel like there's a lot of not just ticket machine whisperers out there, but I feel like a lot of people
ticket machine whisperers.
That know how to game the system in terms of what you're spending your tickets on, what machines or what games you play in order to get tickets.
Yeah,
I feel like there's
got to be some Chuck E. Cheese expert that knows all the Chuck E. Cheese hacks.
There has to be, because if there was a man who watched every episode of The Price is Right with every prize and its associated cost in order to game the system, there's got to be somebody with that Chuck E. Cheese spreadsheet out there.
I'm going to check and see if ChuckECheeseHacks.com is a real website. You guys can move on if you need to.
Very good. My final thought this week is rather simple. Sometimes when you're out walking around, sometimes you stumble upon something beautiful and you want to share it with the world. There are a lot of gifted artists in the United States and the world. And it's just good that they'll grace us with their work, that really stands to improve our lives and the lives of those around us. Eric and Alex, if you could share this piece with everybody live, I just want everyone to know that when Jeff and I went to lunch the other day, we stumbled upon a truck with a beautiful tailgate portrait, if you will,
mosaic
of Sasquatch in the Burt Reynolds pose.
What?
But instead of a leaf covering Sasquatch delicates, it was a raccoon. It was a little raccoon. And it was painted so spot on that it looked like Sasquatch and the raccoon were sitting in the open bed of the truck.
Oh, here it is.
Yeah.
It is, first of all, it did not make me crave beef jerky. It didn't do that. But it made my life better for that day and every day forward. And I hope you all have a chance to take this in.
You saw this in,
really blur that
in
license
real
plate.
Drink it all in. Yeah, we'll blur that. We'll blur it in post.
You saw that in real life, huh?
We saw that in real life. Not only, we were pulling in to the parking lot and I just straight at it like a magnet. I parked as close as I possibly could. And Jeff and I just sat there in silence for a moment, appreciating it.
I don't say I was appreciating it. I was more pondering who has the amount of time and energy to spend doing that. If you have that ability, why a Sasquatch and a raccoon?
Why
in a 3D,
not?
What would you
truck
put?
bed?
Yeah, what would you put?
Not that.
I actually want to know now. What would you put on your truck bed?
What I put in my truck bed?
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to have to let that marinate a little bit because I don't know how you top that. I
That's
mean,
amazing.
maybe a Sasquatch family,
Mhm.
all nude, of course.
Yeah.
So we're going to need at least 4 to 5 raccoons.
Raccoons.
You're saying it just to be.
Yeah.
I know, I'm baiting you guys in. But so if you're listening to the audio version of this, I'll put this on, I'll put it on Twitter, I guess, at DJamesManny, or just come and check out the podcast, the video version, because you must see it. It is glorious. And if anything, it'll make you smile. And if you're having a bad day ever, just please pull this photo up. And man,
It's pretty good.
it's going to make
You do need to see it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, you need to dwell on it. But.
Jeff, quit shaving my Sasquatch. What is your final thought this week?
I'm not sure how to follow that. Actually, the one thing I did want to say is I did have a little bit of oversight. We were going through everybody. We were talking about the 100th episode, played apart. Really do need to give a shout out to like Ben and Nolan, who do a lot of the stories, and Andy Zoll, the best pinch hitter in the league.
Oh, yeah.
For everything that they've done. Too.
It's like the Oscars. When you do the acceptance speech, you miss some people.
I know. The music was playing Jeff off. He
Yes.
couldn't get all that in.
So appreciate those guys too. We also had a podcast polling question, the first one. So we asked, going through the last 100 episodes, which country outside the U.S. has been mentioned the most frequently? What's your guys' guess?
I was going to guess China or Russia. Russia, I think, would have been a favorite, but
I think I was going to also guess China.
Yeah. It is China, and it wasn't really that close.
Oh, okay.
Definitely, it was China. What actually was interesting was Russia and Mexico were right like neck and neck, basically.
Yeah.
India, Germany, not so much, but those three were definitely the most prominent, which kind of gives some insight, too, as to the things that are going on in the industrial sector. A lot of things in Russia from an energy and aerospace perspective. Mexico more with a lot of nearshoring. We were just talking about Tesla looking at a plant there. So interesting what's going on there.
Was it the chip shortage that tipped it in China's favor, or just was
There's
it
just
so
a
far
lot.
away?
There's a lot. I mean, whenever we have like an espionage case
Yeah.
story
yeah,
or something, just a lot going on there.
Just anything from that. What is it called? Like the talent program or whatever. We've run so many stories on.
Well, what was interesting is there was some that were not on here. Like we talked a lot about the Suez Canal.
Oh.
So we ended up having Egypt popped up a little more frequently.
Okay.
How is the Suez Canal doing?
Nobody's
Open?
talking about it anymore.
Yeah.
Open?
Next week, the podcast poll. Looking at the stuff we discussed in this episode, just want to throw this out there. If you weren't working what you do, there's some good word usage.
Mm-hmm.
If you weren't doing what you do right now, where would you rather work? Would you rather be in retail, like Amazon? Software development, we talked about Salesforce. Vehicle repair service, kind of looking at the things we talked about with John Deere and making some of that information available. Or, farming, which will go down in infamy as the time that Anna swore during the podcast. Or if there's something else, we'd just be curious what are some other walks of life that might be of interest to you. and that have a correlation to the industrial sector.
Anna's cussing. And we won't rat anybody out to their boss for saying that they'd rather work in retail.
What I would say is looking at these like
Burlington Coat Factory. That's where I would rather.
You and I have both worked in retail.
Yeah.
I've worked at a repair shop. Mm-hmm. I've worked in the farm. So just haven't done any software development.
I have not done any software development.
It would be weird if we had, yeah.
Yeah.
I started in software development.
Yeah. My software development ended with a keyboarding class where I had to build a house using code that was a square and a triangle. And it took me days.
We do have somebody in this room who got their start in software development.
That's true.
I believe.
One nerd.
The ever popular software to podcast producer tracked.
So take a look at the podcast poll. Let us know and go from there.
All right. Well, before we get out of here this week, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could really help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. Over the holiday, we had a chance to read some of the reviews on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and on YouTube, and we're very thankful for those. Thank you for all the kind words. We appreciate it. Keep them coming. That really helps us grow the podcast. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, Anna, or David at in.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily and weekly newsletters. Make sure you get the podcast delivered to your inbox first. And please subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine and join us live like Mark is today. We really appreciate everybody that's joining us in the live chats. You help keep it fresh. All right. For Jeff and Anna, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.